Alright, this is going to be another rambly, off-the-cuff sort of video. I've noticed that I really enjoyed making these more off-the-cuff sort of videos lately, and I think I've enjoyed making them a little too much. And this realization has inspired me to make this video, in which I will be feeding a little bit further into this this newfound sort of addiction. But this will be the last one for at least a couple weeks. I feel like I've gotten at least a slightly better understanding of just how potentially harmful social media has, the potential to become, and has been becoming more increasingly among our youth. It has been poisoning the minds of our youth, and that's something that, constantly brought up and talked about, but it's true as shit. And I wanted to share that, my newfound perspective. It's slightly altered perspective of just how bad that has the potential to become, and how this is ruining the life. It sounds extreme when it's described in that way, like, oh, it's ruining lives, but it is contributing to the gradual ruining of millions of lives. You have just in increasing numbers these 12, 13, 14-year-old human beings that are being handed off an iPhone at these ages, where they have access to just ridiculous amounts of information, a lot of which should not be accessed by a 12, 13, 14-year-old human. And they have all of these... Okay, so we are very habitual creatures, and it's a little cold. If I sound a little cold, I apologize. We're very habitual creatures, and we're very meaning-driven creatures. And increasingly, among young people, so much of their sense of self-worth is coming from... it's embarrassing to say, but I've noticed just with myself, with making these videos, I've noticed that more of my self-worth has been just gradually becoming more dependent on pumping out this these videos, this content. And it's embarrassing to say, but it's just, again, it's contributed to this increase in perspective of just how potentially harmful this has the potential to become for these young people that are being handed an iPhone, and so much of their self-worth is being tied to the opinions of people that they don't even know, oftentimes faceless. And that's the thing, the good validation has the potential to be just as harmful as the bad shit. It's like when you're receiving all of that, when you're placing all those eggs into that particular self-worth basket of strangers on the internet, that's a very unreliable basket. And this is becoming an exceeding, like, so many young people are placing their entire sense of self-worth is being tied to their presence on social media. I mean, how fucked is that? And I mean, we all have these traits. We all have these narcissistic traits, and they are being fed into like mad. The acknowledgement that these traits are things that should be kept in check, they're not things that should just be mindlessly fed into. In the way in which I have been making these videos, it's something worth minimizing. The ego it's a valuable tool. It has potential for good, but it also has the potential to just completely ruin your life. And this is happening very often with people who are very young. Their entire sense of self-worth is coming from, like, I created a TikTok account recently, and I regret doing that because, yeah, I was hearing just so much about how, like, oh yeah, TikTok is one of these things that is just completely poisoning the minds of our youth, and I wasn't surprised by that claim, but seeing it for myself, holy shit, it's ridiculous. You have these people who are so young who are receiving just insane amounts of validation. You have teenagers receiving just ridiculous amounts of validation based upon superficial attributes. It's just their bodies. And all this validation is coming from, much of it is coming from grown men. So just a large portion of their self-worth is tied to them being sexualized by grown men. And this is where, I mean, this is the future generation. And you have other teenagers that are viewing these more popular ones as just like, oh, okay, so that's what it means to have value. That is what it's worth striving towards. Like, that's a good thing. And so many things that just feed into this already horrific problem, and bad parenting is undoubtedly one of them. But and much of that is due to the parents being just very distant from the harm of it. They don't realize just how much harm these devices, social media, is doing on the minds of their children. I think if they did have a decent conception of what that looks like and the long-term effects of what that will be, many of these parents would be doing a better job. One would hope. One would hope that their shitty parenting is more a consequence of ignorance than genuine disinterest in their child's developmental process and well-being and the future outcomes of their lives. But again, many parents just don't care about the lives of their children. Not really. They certainly don't act as though they do. And the reasons for this, multifaceted, but a lot of it has to do with people who shouldn't become parents becoming parents with people that they don't know all that well, so their attachment towards their child, their concern for the well-being of their child. I mean, it should be obvious that people who have children with others who they no longer give a shit about, I mean, human beings are very selfish creatures, and yeah, we won't have as much of a concern for the well-being of our child if and of course I'm speaking generally, this applies to many people, I'm not saying it applies to you, but yeah, they just won't care as much about the well-being of their child if their child is had with someone that they no longer like or even have come to despise. It's a large portion of that previous video. Getting off track, but see, this is why I don't make these more rambly videos. I can't. Squirrel. I have a hard time staying focused at times. And I've noticed that's gotten worse as a result of making these videos. Focus. It's been detracted. And that's another consequence of too much social media use in general. And that's being fed into by the minds of our youth. Yeah, it's just so many minds are being just poisoned, and parents don't seem to care. About what kind of lives their children will live. They'll claim to, but they won't conduct themselves as though they do.